My name's David. I'm 47, divorced, live just outside of Flagstaff, Arizona in a ranch-style house that used to feel too big, until recently, when I started appreciating the space silence gives you. I'm a mechanic by trade, the kind of guy who always fixes what's broken, whether it's a carburetor or a family argument. My younger brother Josh just got engaged to a woman named Taylor, the kind of woman who turns compliments into competition and never seems to say thank you without a smirk. From day one, she didn't like me. I don't mean she didn't know me, I mean she looked right through me like I was just furniture someone forgot to throw out. Josh and we've had a strained relationship for years, mostly because I kept pulling him out of messes he created himself. Late car payments, missed rent, emergency loans. I did it all quietly, without fanfare. Family first, right? So when the engagement dinner rolled around, I thought, maybe this is my shot to step up and give him something real. A gesture. I worked a double shift for a week straight to pull together a wedding gift, a fully paid package. Venue. Photographer. $5,000 to cover extras. I wrapped it in a simple envelope with a note that just said, for your future, so you don't start it in debt. What happened next made the air go still. I handed the envelope to Josh right after the main course, thinking maybe, just maybe, this was one of those turning point moments. I saw his eyes go wide when he read the note. He looked like he might cry, honestly. But before he could even say anything, Taylor leaned over, peeked into the envelope, and made a sound like she just smelled something sour. She laughed. That low, dismissive kind of laugh that says more than any insult ever could. Then she said, loud enough for the whole table to catch, "Oh, so this is about you trying to matter again, huh?" It hit me like a sucker punch. She didn't say, thank you. Didn't say, wow, that's generous. She looked right at me, like I was some washed-up extra in a movie where she was the star, and dropped that line like it was her mic drop moment. I just sat there, napkin still on my lap, trying to figure out if I'd misheard. Josh looked down, suddenly fascinated by his plate. No one said a word. Not our cousins. Not our mom. Just silence. And here's the twist. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't throw the drink in her face like I wanted to. I didn't say a thing. I stood up, walked over to the waiter, and asked for the manager. Then, with my back turned to the table, I canceled everything. The venue? Gone. Photographer? Called off. The $7,000? Pulled the payment before it cleared. And when I walked back to the table, I smiled. But it wasn't a warm smile. When I say the silence at the table was thick, I mean it felt like the whole room tilted. You ever been in a moment where everyone's pretending not to watch but absolutely is? That's what it felt like. Like the entire engagement dinner froze, glasses mid-air, forks paused on the way to mouths. Everyone suddenly so very invested in their mashed potatoes. I didn't say a word. Just sat back down. I took a sip of my water like it was champagne. You know when someone expects you to explode and instead you go ice-cold calm? That kind of calm terrifies people. Because they don't know what's coming next, and neither do you. Taylor blinked first. She started whispering to Josh, probably asking if I was bluffing. I wasn't. The cancellation confirmations were already pinging into my email. I took out my phone, scrolled for a second, and then gently laid it on the table, screen facing up. Subject lines visible. Wedding venue, cancellation confirmed. Photography deposit reversed. Transaction refund, $7,000. Taylor went pale. Not dramatically, not like in a soap opera, just subtly, like the blood had quietly packed its bags and left. Her smile didn't return. Instead, she said something under her breath to Josh and stood up. Didn't even look at me. Josh, my baby brother, the same one I once drove across state lines to bail out of a DUI mess he swore was totally not his fault, just sat there like someone took his spine out and forgot to put it back. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't about the money. Not really. It wasn't even about the wedding. This was about years, decades, of being the one who held everything together while they handed Josh participation trophies for simply existing. When our dad got sick in 2017, who was the one who sat in that hospital room for nights on end, translating medical jargon and making sure the bills didn't swallow them whole? Me. When the roof caved in literally and mom called sobbing. Me again. Up on the ladder the next day. Patch kit in one hand, resentment in the other. Josh? He showed up with coffee. Took a few selfies. Left before the work even started. And still, I was the one treated like the plus one in my own family. But here's the kicker. As the tension around the table thickened, my mom finally spoke. Quietly. Just one sentence. You didn't have to embarrass them, David. Not thank you. Not I'm sorry. Not that was generous and they were rude. No. Just that I was being embarrassing. I turned to her. This woman I'd carried groceries for, paid utilities for, defended in arguments even when she was dead wrong, and said nothing. But inside, something final snapped. They didn't want my help. They wanted my silence. They wanted the version of me that fixed things without asking questions. The background character who kept their world spinning quietly. But I was done being quiet. I left the engagement dinner early. Just stood up, nodded once to the stunned table of relatives and near strangers, and walked out into the cold Flagstaff night. It was one of those evenings where you can see your breath, and every exhale reminds you that you're still here, still alive, even if it doesn't feel like much of a blessing in the moment. The restaurant lights spilled out behind me, warm and inviting to everyone but me. I stood by my truck for a while, hands in my jacket pockets, trying to figure out how long I'd been asleep at the wheel, not of the truck, but of my own life. You see, I didn't just cancel the wedding stuff. That was just the opening move. On the drive home, I made a mental list. You know that feeling when something in you finally clicks, like a combination lock you've been spinning for years, and suddenly everything lines up? That's what this felt like. Clarity. Cold, focused clarity. By the time I hit my driveway, I'd already made 7 decisions. First, no more money. Not for Josh. Not for Mom. Not for the endless parade of guilt-driven emergencies they always seemed to have when rent was due or someone forgot to pay a bill. Second, I was taking my name off their mortgage. That house. The one I'd been helping pay for because Eric's credit's still recovering and Mom can't do it alone. Not my problem anymore. Third, I was done fixing things. Toilets, cars, fences, roofs. I'd been their on-call handyman for over a decade. Not because they asked nicely, but because they just assumed I would. That ends now. Fourth, I was changing my will. I'd set it up years ago to include Josh and my parents, because I figured family is family. But now I realized, blood means nothing when respect is absent. And the fifth decision? That one was harder. I decided to go no contact. Not low contact. Not take a break. I mean done. Finished. Ghosted, like they never existed. No holidays, no calls, no check-ins. Let them figure it out without me for once. I spent the next few days putting the plan into motion. Called the lawyer. Called the bank. Made a few changes to my emergency contacts. Quiet stuff. Surgical. Like cleaning a wound that's been festering for years. The first sign that they noticed? A voicemail from Mom. Not a tearful apology. Not even an acknowledgement of what happened at dinner. Just a breezy message reminding me that Josh's truck still needed new brakes. And could I pop by this weekend? That's when I knew they'd learned nothing. So I didn't call back. That silence. It was like poison to them. Because for the first time in my life, they didn't have access. To my time. To my money. To me. Josh tried next. Sent a long text that started with, "I think you overreacted," and ended with, "Taylor says you have serious control issues." He really thought that would win me over. So I replied with 3 words, "Lose my number." He didn't respond. But someone else did. Taylor. She emailed me. Yes, emailed. I guess she wanted to be official. It was a whole essay about how my behavior was toxic, how withholding gifts out of spite is abusive, and how Josh and she were considering not inviting me to the wedding after all. I laughed. I'd already canceled the wedding. They didn't even know yet, hadn't checked their email, apparently. The venue was gone. The deposit wasn't refundable. They were counting on me to pull the weight, and now they were about to realize the safety net they took for granted was gone. Not torn, not damaged, just vanished. The next time my phone rang, it was my aunt, my mom's older sister. She never calls. Not for birthdays. Not for holidays. So when I saw her name pop up, I already knew what it was about. I let it ring. Voicemail. She left a message saying she'd heard there was a misunderstanding at the dinner and that family should never let money come between them. That phrase, I swear, it always comes out when the person saying it is not the one handing over the cash. They wanted me to feel guilty. That's the oldest trick in the family playbook. Shame you into compliance. Frame every boundary you draw as an act of cruelty. It used to work, too, especially on me. But not anymore. I ignored the voicemail. Didn't even listen to the end. Just deleted it and moved on with my evening. Heated up some leftovers. Watch an old Western on TV. Went to bed with the kind of quiet you only get after cutting a cord that's been strangling you for years. Then came the real fallout. First, it was the group text. One of those long, exhausting family threads that only ever comes alive when someone dies, gets married, or causes a scene. This time, it was me. My mom kicked it off, not to ask how I was doing or to explain her silence at the dinner. No, she wrote, "David, what you did to your brother was cruel. We are all incredibly disappointed in how you chose to handle this. Taylor is in tears. Josh is devastated. You need to grow up and stop making everything about yourself." I stared at the screen for a full minute. Me. Making it about myself. I reread the message twice just to make sure I wasn't hallucinating. And that's when it hit me again. Even deeper this time, they don't just expect me to fix things. They expect me to feel bad when I don't. That's the trap. That's how they keep you hooked. You spend your life giving, helping, softening your tone, biting your tongue, and the one time you stop, suddenly you're the selfish one. You're the problem. You're the traitor. I didn't reply to the group chat, but I did something better. I left it. I clicked leave conversation and confirmed it without hesitation. A small thing, maybe, but it felt massive. Like putting down a boulder I didn't realize I'd been carrying. About an hour later, Josh tried calling again. Then texting. Then calling. Then his number came up as no caller ID. I blocked that too. I wasn't angry anymore. That's what confused them the most. I wasn't storming into family events demanding an apology. I wasn't writing long emails about how much they hurt me. I was just done. And you know what? That's scarier to people like them than any shouting match. They don't know how to deal with someone who walks away without slamming a door. Someone who just stops picking up. But then, I'll admit, the next day hit me harder than I expected. It was Sunday, and for the first time in over 15 years, I didn't drive over to my parents' place. No grocery stop. No oil change in Dad's truck. No folding chairs dragged out for family time. Just me at home, standing in the garage like a man who's forgotten what to do with a free afternoon. I kept checking the clock like I was late for something. I wasn't. That's what broke me a little. Because no matter how wrong they were, no matter how deeply they betrayed me, there's a part of you that still wants the version of them that doesn't exist. The one you imagined all these years. The one where you finally matter. But I knew better now. And I was going to hold that line. They didn't even call first. It was Tuesday afternoon. I'd just come back from running errands. Oil for the shop. A rotisserie chicken for dinner. Nothing fancy. I parked, popped the tailgate, and there they were. Standing on my porch like they had a right to be there. My mom, Josh, and, of course, Taylor, arms folded like she was bracing for a windstorm. No warning. No message. Just there. Josh had that sheepish look he always puts on when he knows he's about to ask for something. Mom looked like she'd been crying, or wanted me to think she had. And Taylor? Taylor looked like she was walking into a performance she'd rehearsed. I didn't go to them. I didn't call out, didn't wave. Just shut the truck door and walked slowly up the steps like I didn't even recognize them. The first words out of Mom's mouth? We need to talk about Sunday. Not, hi. Not, can we come in? Not, I'm sorry. Just straight into the script. I didn't respond. I unlocked my door, stepped inside, and, yeah, I'll admit it, left it open just enough for them to follow if they had the nerve. Spoiler alert, they did. I walked into the kitchen, dropped the groceries on the counter, and poured myself a glass of water. Didn't offer them one. Didn't even look back. Josh started with some version of an apology, but you could tell it was rehearsed. We were all a little tense. Things got blown out of proportion. Taylor didn't mean it like that. He stopped short of saying he was sorry. Taylor? She chimed in next, voice dripping with that passive-aggressive sweetness people use when they're not sorry but want you to drop it anyway. Something about how generous I was, but the way I took it back was just so unexpected. Unexpected. Like I was the one who broke the unspoken contract. I finally turned around. Not yelling. No raised voice. I just asked, why are you here? They exchanged glances. The kind that says this isn't going how we planned. Josh said, we just want to make things right. I leaned on the counter, arms crossed. Do you even know what that would look like? Silence. That told me everything. Because here's the truth, they weren't here to make it right. They were here to patch the optics. To smooth things over just enough, so I'd go back to funding their wedding, fixing their lives, fading into the background again. That's what this visit was, not peace. Damage control. So I laid it out for them. I told them I was done. Not angry. Not bitter. Just done. I explained, calmly, maybe too calmly, that I'd spent most of my adult life trying to prove I mattered to people who were never going to say it out loud. And that now, I'd finally stopped needing to hear it. My mom looked like she'd been slapped. But instead of reflecting, she doubled down. You're being cruel. That hit harder than I wanted to admit. Because for a long time, I feared that. That if I stopped being the reliable one, they'd say I was mean, cold, heartless. And now that I had, they were proving it true. But only from their side. So I told them, no, not told. Declared that if they saw kindness as currency, they were bankrupt. And I wasn't their ATM anymore. Not for money. Not for emotional bailouts. Not for guilt relief. Taylor scoffed and said I was overreacting. That was her exit line. She turned and left first, heels sharp against the wooden steps like punctuation marks. Josh followed, not even looking at me. And my mom? She stood there for one last second, like she was going to say something profound. Instead, she just whispered, "You'll regret this." I didn't answer. Because the truth is, I already had, for the last 20 years. The thing no one tells you about cutting people off, especially family, is how quiet it gets. It's not just the lack of calls or texts. It's deeper than that. It's waking up on a Sunday and realizing you don't have to brace yourself for a passive-aggressive comment over coffee. It's sitting in your own kitchen and realizing no one's about to barge and asking you to fix their radiator or co-sign a loan they'll never repay. It's quiet. And it's peaceful, but not right away. The first few days were strange. Like stepping out of a long, toxic conversation and still hearing the echoes. I kept reaching for my phone, half expecting some urgent message. An apology. A tantrum. A guilt trip wrapped in faux concern. But nothing came. And slowly, that silence stopped feeling like absence. It started feeling like freedom. I went to work. I came home. I didn't have to answer to anyone. I didn't have to explain where I was or why I wasn't showing up to Sunday lunch. And the funny part? No one else called either. The rest of the family, the cousins, the aunts, the ones who used to check in only when someone needed a truck or a free Labor Day, disappeared like fog once the sun rises. Because I wasn't useful anymore. That's what it came down to. They didn't love me. They loved what I did for them. And once I stopped doing it, I might as well have vanished. But here's the twist. I didn't feel sad. I felt clean. Then something happened that I didn't expect. My neighbor, Gail, older woman, tough as nails, retired nurse, knocked on my door that Friday. She brought over some extra soup and a tin of cornbread, said she made too much. I knew better. Gail always knows when something's gone down. She doesn't ask. She notices. I thanked her, and we talked for a bit on the porch. About nothing, really, her garden, the weather, the fact that I finally painted the trim I'd been putting off for a year. And for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I was bracing for the next emotional gut punch. I was just a guy on a porch, drinking sweet tea with a neighbor, watching the light fade behind the pines. That weekend, I went hiking alone. Took one of those high ridge trails just outside Walnut Canyon, the kind I hadn't touched in years because I was always needed somewhere. The air was crisp. I could hear my own breathing. And I remember thinking, not hoping, not wishing, but knowing this was what it felt like to belong to yourself. No expectations. No strings. Just me, my feet on solid ground, and nothing weighing me down that I didn't choose to carry. And in that moment, standing on a ledge, wind cutting across my face, I realized something so simple it almost knocked the breath out of me. They never really knew me. Not the real me. Not the version that wasn't convenient or profitable or willing to eat every insult with a polite nod. They never wanted to know him. They only wanted the version that kept their lights on and their egos intact. And now? Now I was getting to know him. The real me. And for the first time in a long time, maybe ever, I liked the man I found there. I should have known they weren't done. People like that never are. About 2 weeks after that porch scene, the one where Taylor flounced off like she was storming out of a soap opera and my mom whispered that I'd regret this, I got another knock at the door. This time, it was just Josh. No Taylor. No mom. Just him, standing there in a wrinkled hoodie and looking like he hadn't slept in 3 days. For a second, I thought maybe he came to apologize. Really apologize. Not the sorry you got upset kind, but something real. Something earned. I opened the door halfway and leaned against the frame, just watching him. He looked up, and his voice cracked before he even said anything. I need your help. I should have closed the door right then and there. But I didn't. I didn't say come in, but I didn't shut him out either. I just let him talk. Turns out, the wedding was off. Not postponed. Off. Taylor called it quits. Apparently the fight over the venue and the public embarrassment I caused made her reevaluate everything. She'd returned the ring, moved back in with her mom, and left Josh with a stack of non-refundable deposits and a joint bank account she'd already drained before walking out. I blinked, not even pretending to feel surprised. And then he said the thing that made my jaw clench. She said you ruined it. Like I was the villain in their romantic tragedy. Like all I'd done was destroy something beautiful out of spite, rather than save myself from being the family mule one more time. But that wasn't even the favor. No, that came next. He wanted to move in. Not can I crash for a night. Not can I stay till I get back on my feet. Move in. Like nothing had happened. Like we were still brothers in that childhood way, where fights over comic books turned into sleepovers and everything could be fixed with a bowl of cereal and a Saturday morning cartoon. Only we weren't kids anymore. And this wasn't a comic book argument. This was betrayal, layered in entitlement and marinated in years of silent disrespect. He stood there on my porch, asking for a key, and all I could think was how many times I'd handed him lifelines. Money, tools, a place to stay, a car to borrow. And every single time, he acted like it was owed, not appreciated, expected. I asked him one question. If the roles were reversed, if I'd ruined my relationship, drained my accounts, and showed up at your door after cutting you down in front of everyone, would you let me in? He didn't answer, because we both knew the answer. So I told him the truth. Not with anger, not with cruelty, just with finality. I don't trust you anymore. That was it. He stood there a little longer, like maybe if he waited long enough, I'd cave. But I didn't. I couldn't. Not because I didn't care, but because I cared too much about myself, finally. Eventually, he nodded. Just once. And walked away. I watched him go. Not out of spite. Not to make sure he left. But because it was the last time I'd see him as the brother I used to know. The last time I feel even a flicker of that old instinct to protect him. That part of me? Gone. And as the door clicked shut behind me, I realized something else. When you stop setting yourself on fire to keep others warm, it gets cold for a while. But that cold? That's where healing starts. They didn't take the silence well. See, people like my family, they don't cope with rejection. They rewrite it. And about a week after Josh walked away from my porch, it started. The posts. At first, it was subtle. Taylor posted a blurry photo of her engagement ring on the kitchen counter with a broken heart emoji. No caption. Just vibes. The comments came rolling in. What happened? You okay, babe? DM me. Then came Mom. A Facebook status that started with, "It breaks my heart when families fall apart," and ended with, "Some people choose pride over forgiveness." No names, of course. But anyone who knew us, anyone who'd been at the engagement dinner or heard the whispers, knew exactly who she meant. Me. Josh followed up a few days later with an Instagram story. It was a black screen with white text. "It's always the people you do anything for who leave you when you need them most." I'll admit, I stared at that one for a while. Not because it hurt, but because I finally saw it for what it was. Not grief. Not loss. Control. They weren't mourning my absence. They were punishing me for it. Publicly. And it worked for a minute. People I hadn't heard from in years started texting me out of nowhere. Vague messages. Stuff like, "Hey man, just checking in," or "Saw some stuff online. Hope you're good." But the real kicker? Someone, and I'd bet good money it was Taylor, messaged my boss. Apparently, she sent a long, dramatic email about how I had emotional outbursts, that I canceled a wedding out of spite, and that I was unstable around women. She framed it as a concern for workplace safety. I guess she figured if she couldn't make me bend with guilt, she'd try fear. My boss? He's a no-nonsense guy. Used to be in the Navy. He called me into his office, showed me the email, and said, "I know it's crap. Just tell me what's going on." So I did. Not the whole saga, just the essentials. Kept it simple, calm, straightforward. Told him I'd cut ties with some toxic family and that someone was retaliating. He nodded once and said, "Cool, we're done here." That was it. The storm they tried to kick up? A soft breeze in a room where I'd already shut all the windows. But that moment stuck with me, because for the first time in this whole mess, I realized I didn't have to fight back. I didn't have to match their drama. I didn't need to post screenshots or write long threads explaining my side. Because the truth? Peace is loud. When you stop reacting, they lose their audience. When you don't flinch, they lose their narrative. And I wasn't going to give them either. I logged off for a week. No social media. No texts. Just my work, my walks, and the sound of wind moving through the pines behind my house. Let them rage. Let them twist it however they want. I knew the truth. And that was finally enough.